friends, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today is going to be me discussing my thoughts on Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This will be spoiler free for all of y'all who are interested in this book but haven't had a chance to pick it up yet or don't know if you should. You have a spoiler free option. I have a lot of things to talk about this book, and we all know my tendency to ramble and ramble and ramble and ramble. So instead of me just continuing to babble on for this intro, let's just get into it before, I forget. And I just keep talking and talking, much like I am now. Before I get into it, I'm going to read off the trigger warnings that are in the front couple of pages of this book. Thank you to the publisher who allowed trigger warnings to be placed on this book. It's a very heavy topic, and I think trigger warnings are very special and very needed for this book, as well as the ones that I have also noticed. Okay, so the trigger warnings for this is sexual abuse, rape, assault, child abuse, kidnapping, and addiction to opioids. These are the ones that are listed, but the ones that I wanted to kind of specify is also there's gaslighting, there's emotional and physical abuse, as mentioned, and pedophilia. So now we can get into the meat of the story. If you guys don't know what Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson is, it's a 2021 release. This follows young 17, the age is important, 17-year-old Enchanted who wants to be a singer. That's all she's ever wanted to be. She can come up with songs and writes daily. She has a beautiful voice, and which will only get more beautiful, or she'll only get better and more defined as she practices and gets singing lessons. However, she is the eldest of a family of, I believe, quite a lot. She is the eldest, so she has to take on kind of pseudo parents when her parents are working, and her family wants her to focus on her education before singing, so she hasn't had a chance to. That is until one day she enters a singing competition. She is not chosen to join the competition. She grabs the attention of Corey Fields, a very popular R&B artist who promises to mentor her, and because she is not only enamored with this man but also the prospect of becoming a singer and having her dreams come true, she fights to be mentored under him, not realizing that he has some pretty sinister plans that he's kind of tucked away and has perfected over the years. My first thoughts on this book is that I was actually very excited about this, to hear about this book. I didn't know that it was coming out. It was a 2020 release. When I first heard about this book was, I think, around like I want to say like November, December, and it picked up a bit more traction in the new year. I was super stoked to hear about this book. I think that a lot of YA needs to talk about these topics a little bit more, primarily because these things do happen to young adults, and I feel like to talk about it gets rid of the stigma, especially if they can find themselves in a book and can see the signs in a way that doesn't really allow them to do the research, to sit through the boring classes that kids at their age aren't really interested in. So I think having it in a fictional place where they can kind of swallow it a little bit easier and digest it and know what to look out for would probably be the best and the smartest thing to keep a lot of kids as safe as we can. I knew this was going to be a good read. It just had those vibes to it. Not only is the cover gorgeous, but I've heard a lot of good things about Tiffany D. Jackson as an author and her ability to write hard-hitting topics such as the one that is covered in Grown. So I knew that it was going to be a good book, and I just needed a chance to pick it up. But since it did come out in September and I didn't hear about it until December-ish, I was not in the best mental place, so I decided to put it away until I was. And a couple weeks last month, I was shopping for Kingdom of Ash, I believe. No. My sweet, sweet partner was like, yeah, we won't go, he wanted to go to Best Buy, I think, and then he's like, oh no, not Barnes & Noble. I wasn't planning on going to Barnes & Noble that day, but then he brought it up. So I had to go to Barnes & Noble that day. And I ended up picking this up along with Kingdom of Ash. So let's start off with the things I didn't like. And there aren't a lot of things in here, which is why I started it off in the first place. The first thing I didn't like was that I felt like the ending was very rushed. A lot of the things that occurred, a lot of things in the ending were kind of introduced. We had a cast of brand new characters kind of come in for a very short scene, only to really serve a purpose of helping Enchanted solve the mystery that's going on in her own head. Then, honestly, it happened very quickly, and part of me still doesn't really know exactly how they got from point A to point B. And I've talked to like Lisa about this, who also read it like a couple months ago, and she was also very much like from point A to point B either. So we were both just kind of like, okay, ending is rushed. Like if like one of us missing how they got there is like one thing, but the two of us missing it is another thing entirely. The other thing I didn't like was the inclusion of mental health in this. And by inclusion, I mean like not that it was done poorly, but I think that it was introduced a little too late in the game. By the time that we are introduced to potential mental health issues, to potential mental illnesses, and the familial history behind them, it's almost like, I think, a good 3/4 or so. It's a little over halfway through the book by the time you do hear about it. So like it made sense to include it, but also it didn't have enough time to develop, and it felt like it felt like it was just kind of thrown in there for the sake of being thrown in there, and just to give the police and authorities more of a reason to question Enchanted and her reliability. It was weird, and I feel like without that little bit of including mental illness in there, the police would have definitely found another way to make Enchanted seem like an unreliable witness. We didn't need it, and I feel like since it was thrown in there so quickly and so late in the game, it didn't really do much of the story but try to add some of that bit of unreliability that wasn't there. The last thing that I didn't like was this weird mystery with her friend. I can't get too much into it because it does start like basically all like 60% of the way through the book, but like as you guys can tell by the placement, it did start way too late. By the time we got into it and got into the concept of what was going on with her friend, there were so many other things going on that the idea of her friend not there, or no one, that her idea, like trying to figure out who her friend was and where her friend went, was just a lot. And like I said, it didn't really serve much other than to make Enchanted seem and make herself feel less like of an unreliable witness, which I feel like I said, the media and the authorities are like pretty good at doing that themselves. We didn't really need to introduce this thing to isolate Enchanted even further when she's already pretty isolated herself. Moving on to the things I did like, this book. Whew. This book had my fight or flight response on overdrive. Like every time I would read it, I wouldn't be able to there were so many things that had me going off, and it's very obvious that it's also Enchanted's fight or flight response going off, because she does justify a lot of the things happening to her at the beginning as okay. She finds a way to justify and rationalize the things happening to her, but deep down, there's a part of her that knows that this is inappropriate, that this shouldn't be happening. But it definitely, the way that it's written triggered my fight or flight response so much, and genuinely I just wanted to go into the book and just whack, not Enchanted, but Corey. I just wanted to whack him in the head and be like, get the fuck away from her. Get away. Shoo. Because it was just written that well. It literally had me at the edge of my seat the entire time. By the time the book starts, it starts off kind of in the present, and then we go backwards. It starts off in the present, and then we go back to the beginning of how everything kind of happened. And then by the time we get toward the middle of the book, I want to say, we end up looping back around to the present time and then continuing from there. So it had me questioning at the edge of my seat as to what could have possibly happened, as well as trying to see and understand how far this relationship had gone, and what exactly it took for Enchanted to finally get the courage to say enough. I think this book did a really wonderful job of showing the process of grooming children and family, as well as the furthering tests that abusers go to. For those of you guys who are unaware, I studied psychology, I studied psychology of trauma, I studied the psychology of law. The one thing that I learned recently, well actually not so much learned but was reminded of, is that groomers don't just groom the victim that they're preying on, they also groom family and friends. And by that I mean it's like making promises, being friends with them, becoming this very likable and trustworthy guy in their lives, to where you trust your child. You know, the thing that you held for several years before they learned how to walk, the person you taught their first words to, and taught their morals to. It gets to a point where they've groomed you so well that you trust them with their child so wholeheartedly before, you know, things escalate. And then same thing with abusers, they do tend to. And it also shows how untouchable they think they are because they've done such a good job of manipulating their victims. It also shows how easily the abused will defend and rationalize their abuser. There was a point in the book where, I'll try not to spoil it too much, but there was a line where Enchanted says, oh, Mr. Hyde is out right now, I just have to be nice and wait for Dr. Jekyll to come back. I thought that was a very powerful line in the book, and it clearly very resonated with me because I can remember it without tabbing. I did not tab this book. I think this book did a wonderful job, and I say this really sad, like with a lot of happiness in my heart, that it did a wonderful job of showing how poorly Black women are believed when it comes to them coming forward about their assaults, and how quickly people are to turn their backs on them when they do get the strength and the courage to come forward about what has happened to them. It also shows how quick and how willing and quick we are to forgive and vilify public figures and celebrities of potential wrongdoings they have done, particularly people in this book were quick to forgive him and blame Enchanted for everything that has happened and make up lies. And it's just very obvious that the world would rather vilify a guilty man than protect an innocent Black woman. The writing in this book was so gorgeous. Enchanted just has this wonderful way of words and expressing her emotions, and she sounds like a wonderfully well-spoken girl without you being unable to feel them, if that makes sense. Like, while it was explained in a way that was so lyrically done, but done so succinctly that you felt every emotion and heard everything, and you held your breath when she did, and you flinched when she did, but it was done in a way that it wasn't overdone, and you felt like you were being forced to feel these emotions. They came very organically, as Enchanted felt them as well. And I really enjoyed that, and that was like the one thing that kept me going, was her Enchanted's ability to weave these descriptions, these metaphors, that in a short few words describes the situation perfectly, but without losing the oomph behind what was going on. Overall, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, like a very low 5. I would have wanted to give this like the full, like, round whole 5, but the instances that I didn't like, kind of like, it didn't ruin it for me, but it certainly took away the impact of the resolution for me, just because it was a lot of things occurring at the same time, and some of these things I don't think were necessary or could have been introduced at a later point. And in that sense, in that scenario, had they been introduced at an earlier point, or just excluded altogether, would have made the resolution a little bit more impactful because it wasn't so rushed and so condensed. But overall, I highly recommend this book if you are in the proper space, mental space. Don't read this book if you're even like the slightest bit off, because it is very graphic and very much like, I was shocked. But I highly recommend this book. I think it's a very important topic, and I need to see more topics like this shown in YA. I think it's very important to normalize conversations like this, to have young adults who are coming into themselves and coming into their place in this world to ask these kind of questions to their parents while they still have a chance, and to know how to create boundaries for themselves and know what is okay, what lines are okay. Because from personal experience, I have known too many people growing up who were groomed by older men. I was almost there. So I think it's a very important thing to have this line, to draw this line, and have the line the first block of defense, that children see this and digest this kind of information being fiction, because I feel like reality is a little too heavy for them, or it's kind of too boring, especially when teachers teach it in class. It's very methodical, and what happens in these stories are not methodical at all. Well, the abusers are methodical, but like what the individual stories are not very, like, they're not reading off a book kind of methodical like a text. But that is it for my review of Grown. Hopefully I did keep it pretty spoiler free. I'm pretty sure I did, but if not, then I'll change the title. But if you guys like this book or didn't like this book, please let me know down below. If you guys have any requests that are similar to this book in terms of topics, heaviness, or whatever, leave those down below as well. I will have the trigger warning to this book in the description. Same thing with my socials if you guys want to reach me on there. But until next time, hit like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful week and you guys are reading plenty of books, or enough books for your own personal reading like pace. But until then,